to the Thriving Through podcast, where we dive deep into what it really takes to build a successful consulting practice. I'm your host, AJ Riedel, and today's episode features a consultant who made the leap from corporate to consulting and replaced her full-time income in just 6 months while still working her day job. Jessica Rickel of Set to Scale Business Services shares her journey, including how she leveraged her existing network to launch her business, the importance of building genuine community for client retention, and her evolution from hourly retainers to delivery-based pricing. If you're wondering how to create a business that serves both your bank account and your lifestyle, this conversation is packed with actionable insights you won't want to miss. Welcome to this episode of the Thriving Through podcast, the podcast exclusively for self-employed consultants to help them understand exactly what it takes to build a successful consulting practice. Today, I am delighted to have Jessica Rickel as my guest. Her company name is Set to Scale Business Services. And Jessica, welcome.
Welcome, or hi, good to be here.
Hi.
Hi.
So let's start out with a question about you went from corporate to consult to your own business fairly recently. Tell us a little bit about the path from paycheck to self-employment.
Yeah, so good question. So I started my business in November of 2022. So we're coming up on almost 3 years later this year. And prior to that, I had worked in corporate, mostly startup environments for a little under a decade. Um, I found that I just really enjoyed that kind of I don't know, like fast-paced, scrappy, wearing a lot of different hats work. Worked in various different departments of all of those businesses. If anybody's worked in a startup before, you understand that you just kind of every day looks a little bit different. So I really enjoyed my time doing all of that. I was a membership director for a few years, and I think that's when I first really started thinking about, maybe I would like to do something on my own at some point. I started having people from that membership reaching out to me asking, hey, could you help me implement some of these things like in my own business? Um, and then, that a few years down the road ended up becoming what kind of launched me into my own business is just people that I met along the way asking if I could help consult with them personally. And yeah, that's kind of, I don't know, that's the long story short of my journey is just I met a lot of people along the way in my corporate life that ended up becoming some of my first clients, and the rest is kind of history, I guess.
Okay. What was the definitive moment? You said that you had been thinking about it. You had some of your clients, internal clients, approach you. What was that moment when you said, "This is it. I'm going to do it"?
It kind of started for me. I think it was gradual. So I was working at a technology company. So after the membership director role, I ended up working for a membership tech company. And it was while I was there that, I started just having a lot of people from my prior role start reaching out to me. I had people, that I was working with at the membership tech company kind of reaching out to me as well. Um, and the company that I was with was really supportive of me, having other ventures, and so I think endlessly grateful for that, just because I know that so many companies are not very friendly towards people kind of having their own side hustles and side businesses, and that really gave me the I think just freedom and flexibility to test things out and see what worked. And so I started taking on clients. Um, November of 2022, kind of started taking on my first clients and was still working full time and kind of trying to balance that. And then within 6 months, I had replaced my full-time income with my consultancy clients and the work that I was doing on my own. So I think that's when I decided, okay, I think I could take this full time if I'm only dedicating, 10 or 15 hours a week to this right now, and I'm seeing replacement of my full-time income. Um, then let's do this full time and see what I can do. So that is when I decided, okay, I'm gonna phase out of my full-time role, phase fully into taking my own clients. And yeah, so that's probably the moment was when I hit that income point for myself of saying, okay, this, I never wanted to jump in to if I didn't have to. I know that some people do it because they have to. But if I didn't have to, I didn't want to jump into, I'm going from paycheck to nothing, and now I'm building
Hmm.
nothing. So being able to kind of prove that concept of, okay, I'm actually providing services, I'm actually doing things that people want and are looking for and need, and are willing to pay for. Um, yeah, so that was the moment. That's not like a super huge, like, banner in the sky moment, I guess, but that was for me when I first realized, okay, I think I could take this full time.
Okay. You did something impressive while you were still doing this as a side hustle, is that you replicated your corporate salary while you were working part-time on this. What did you do? Because a lot of consultants don't, even after a year or two. They're still struggling to make the same amount they made in corporate. So, what's the secret to your success?
Oh man, I mean, I don't know if I think it's a lot of trial and error. It was a lot of figuring out like what and again, I think that's why it was just so invaluable to have the support of my company at the time saying, like you run with this and we fully support you. Um because it was just a lot of trial and error and figuring out like what what do people need, honing in on my processes and my services and my products and what I was doing. um yeah, I mean, I wish that there was like some crazy secret, but I think it was just a lot of when you have the flexibility to try different things, you try different things and try different services. And yeah, that's probably I think what it came down to for me is just I felt like I had a lot of freedom. And since I was still getting a paycheck, I could try lots of, take bigger risks, I guess, that then
Mhm.
had bigger payoffs, maybe, is a good way to put it. Um, and yeah, I don't know. That's kind of, it just, yeah, I think also my network came into play. I wasn't looking for, I see a lot of people online who they're starting from I don't have any clients, I'm starting to do this consultancy, or I'm offering services, or I'm offering a product, but they're trying to find their first client. And I think that the fact that my first clients were people that were already in my network that were coming to me really helped too. So I started my business with like 6 or 7 awesome clients that were people that I had worked with or worked for, or knew somehow. Um, so that helped a lot too. And I think once I started putting out there a little bit more that, hey, I'm doing this, I'm offering these services, um, people in my network kind of started like inquiring more. So I think that it was just sort of a mix of a lot of different things that I just was really blessed to have at the right time. Um, Not really. I know everyone looks for like a crazy secret, but yeah, I think it was just a lot of um right time, right place, right services, um right connections.
Okay. Who is your ideal client?
So primarily I work with online businesses. So I work with people who are in the a lot of like community managers, member-based organizations. Like I said, I came from a membership background and a membership tech background, so I'm very familiar with the inner workings of member-based businesses. So online communities, associations, that have an online community component. I work with coaches and other consultants who are looking to build and grow community. Um, so that's the kind of primary people that I work with and that I think my sweet spot is in. It's just helping those online businesses thrive and create strategies
Okay.
that continue to grow their community.
And what problem or challenges do you solve for them?
I think that for most of my clients, well, it's kind of twofold. I like to tailor my approach to each client, but I do find that most of my clients, when we start working together, the first thing that we really work through is like brand. A lot of people like they have an audience online somewhere, or maybe they don't and they want to start building one. Um, but that brand piece and like having a solid brand voice and brand identity is lacking or missing or something that they feel they're struggling with. So we go through, let's develop your brand identity, figure out if you have a website already, like let's update it and figure out how to speak directly to your ideal clients. Um, if you don't have a website, let's build one. And really just helping them create systems and processes and funnels that take that brand and get it to the right people, basically. So I do a lot of website, brand, copywriting, email marketing, sort of just that ecosystem that
Mhm.
helps people grow community and grow audience. And yeah, that's most of the work that I do. And then just helping create that strategy for them um, that helps them see the growth they're looking for.
Okay. Okay. Can you walk us? You worked, when we talked earlier, you mentioned growing a membership by 4,000 members in your previous role. Can you walk us through the specific strategies you used that consultants could apply to their own clients' growth challenges?
Yeah, so just to give some context to that, so I worked for a membership that was around 1,000 members when I started my tenure as their director of, program and experience. By the time I left 3 years later, the membership had grown by about 4,000 members. So um, I think the biggest thing for me, and again, why I focus so much on online businesses and online communities, is that the like I've never seen a better online community than the one that we had. And I think community is what people are looking for. So regardless of what industry you're in, what niche you're in, who you are, who your clients are, people want community. And I think that differs from audience, which is what I hear a lot of people talking about is, oh, grow your audience, grow your audience, grow your audience. And it's like, okay, well, you can get as many followers as you want, but are those people connected to you and connected to each other in community? So that I think is really, to me, if you are a consultant or if you're working with clients who, have any like to what you said, growth challenges you're trying to solve, I would say community is really important, especially today. We are more connected than ever with social media and other digital spaces, but also more disconnected and isolated than ever and looking for actual human connection. So the more that you can provide that, the better you're going to be able to do. I see, and I think this is kind of universal. Any brand, any business can do this. It just kind of takes some strategy of, okay, what community do we provide? How can we provide more community for our members or our customers? There are lots of brands out there that have created awesome communities that are not necessarily associations or memberships or anything like that. Like I think of brands like Apple, or, they have entire forums of people who are just there and talking about Apple products and asking questions. So it doesn't have to be limited to, we're a member-based organization to create a community. You can create a community around any product, any service, any industry. So that's what I would say. I think for when I was in that role as a membership director, what kept people, we would have people leave the membership, churn, and then come back and say, I thought I could live without this community, but it turns out I couldn't, you know? So that community piece, people can find education anywhere. People can find resources anywhere. We live in this age where information is all over, you know, you can find anything that you want online. But that connection piece is what actually is the invaluable piece of whatever you're offering, is that connection point, and that's what will keep people coming back, and connected. At least that's what I found.
Okay. What is there a secret sauce, or what is really important when you're setting up a community? You know, you found that you built a very successful community in your corporate job. What's that secret sauce or that magic that makes a community really robust?
Yeah, I think there's multiple components of it, right? But I think listening to what your customers or what your clients or your ideal clients are saying, I think a lot of people create without understanding what the actual need is, which I think, going back to what we were talking about earlier, you know, when I started my business, I think a lot of what was really helpful is that I had people who were coming to me that I already, like, we were able to verify before I went out on my own and said we're launching this full time. Like, I knew that they needed, you know, that I provided something that was of value. And so I think, um, yeah, people sometimes create without having any kind of proof of concept or proof of this is even something that my clients need or my customers need. So really listening to what people are saying, and then creating content, creating resources, creating courses, creating you know, events and webinars and things that actually speak to the pain points that they are dealing with in real time. I think that is probably the most important thing that you can do, um, in that kind of environment. And I think that's, you know, what yeah, what can see a lot of success.
Okay. You described the challenge of being a one-person show in your business. What systems or approaches have you or are you developing to manage everything without having to work 80-hour weeks?
Yeah. I mean, good question. One that I'm still sometimes trying to figure out, but I try to utilize like automation technology as much as I can. It's something that I help my clients implement. I think that technology can be a really great partner and one that's often underutilized. So for myself, I'm always looking to see, like, is there a way that I can automate this better? Is there a way that I can utilize a technology, um, to, you know, like, make my life, my processes smoother, easier. Um, for me, I think that's the biggest one, is just automating as much as possible. Not like, I don't think that like everything can be automated. I think that in a kind of a weird dichotomy. There's like, you want to automate as much as possible, but there are still things that you have to do that don't scale very well. So maintaining that balance of like, I want to automate what I can, but I also want to um, do things that don't scale that actually are like high value. So things like building relationships and DMing people and doing interviews and, you know, things that don't necessarily scale in, you know,
Mhm.
like, I can't automate that. But there still is a lot of value to it. So I would say those are kind of the two things that I try to balance and that help me sort of overcome that, is investing in the activities that don't scale that actually matter a lot, and then automating as much as I can, with technology so that things can run without me as much as they can.
Okay, give me an example of how of a process that you've automated and the technology that you're using.
Yeah. I mean, I think that things like, you know, a really simple one that I think everybody should be doing is just automating some sort of contact flow on your website, or some sort of like resource download or something like that that can instantly be, whether somebody finds that at 2 in the morning or 4 in the afternoon, there's something for them, right? So you can really use any like almost any email marketing tool. Right now I use ConvertKit, for better or for worse, right? But I use ConvertKit to deliver like resources that I have on my website, um, so that people can get those in real time. Same thing with contact flow. Um, I use ConvertKit for that as well, so people can subscribe to my email list, or they can get in touch with me and it sends me a email instantly, again, no matter what time of day or night that is. Um, Consumer behavior has really shifted and people want what they want and they want it now. And so the more that you can kind of remove those delays, and help them get instant access to what they're looking for, the better. So,
Okay. And after they've got, so you've automated that, you've given them a resource, they downloaded that. At what point, is there a point when you turn it into that more high value touch that is not automated? And how do you do that? How do you convert them into, say, a discovery call or a strategy session?
yeah. So, I mean, I think that a lot of that comes down to mapping customer journey. And so, I've developed for my own business and I help my customers develop these as well, but like customer journey maps. So, of all the different places that somebody might find you, what are all the different kind of public facing places, whether that's social media or that is, um, podcast, or where all these like kind of, lack of a better term, like kind of top of funnel places that people could find you. And then from there, okay, where do we lead them? So if somebody finds you on social media, they click through to your profile, where do they go next? And then kind of mapping that whole journey. Okay, this is where I want them to go. All right, they download my free resource. Okay, well, what do we want to happen next? Okay, well, they're entered into this email sequence that then takes them through, and maybe it's a 7 email sequence over the course of a few weeks. And then that's kind of introducing people to who you are, to your brand, and offering things like discovery calls, or maybe you offer a course or something like that. But being able to kind of map that journey, I think a big mistake that I see a lot of people making is that you're sending all the same communication to all the same people, as opposed to sending communication to people depending on the stage of the customer journey that they're in. Your most long-term client doesn't want to see something about your free resource because they're already invested into your business thousands of dollars, right? Why do they want to see your free resource? Whereas the person who just downloaded your free resource doesn't want to hear about your $4,000 offer, right? So really tailoring that customer journey. And I think that's what, in kind of a long-winded way, that's what I've tried to do. So if you were to download like a free resource, then it would kind of take you through, um, you know, some emails that would ultimately get you to the next point in the journey, and then the next point, and so on. So yeah, customer journey maps, I think, are super important and something that I try to practice as much as I can in my own business too.
Okay, I love that, the customer journey map. So so right at the beginning, you're very strategic that if you're going to provide a resource, you've already thought through, okay, after they download the resource, how am I going to keep in touch with them? And what do I want them to do next?
Yep.
Cool. Okay. Okay. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about pricing and the pricing journey. Has your approach to pricing your services evolved since you started your business?
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. Um,
Okay.
I think like a lot of people, I started out trading kind of time for money, um, where, I was selling retainers. So, okay, you're on a 10-hour a month retainer or a 20-hour a month retainer, and that's going to be X dollars, um, which again worked really well at the start. And that, is how most of my first clients were set up. Um, but what I found with that, which is I think what a lot of people who are doing similar things find, is that um, 10 hours of work a month looks different for me than it might look for somebody else, right? And what people are really interested in are results and outcomes and deliverables. And so, like, my clients would ask me to do something, and you don't want to charge them over what you've already, you don't want to charge them overtime because maybe they feel like this should be within the 10-hour. Maybe they feel like they've only asked you for 10 hours a month of something, or maybe they feel like, they don't know where that line is either. But they need this and they, whatever. So that's how I started out, was just with these retainers. And I just found that while my clients were really happy, that I was not, and that I was struggling, usually working um, more hours than what I had contracted with them, but I wouldn't let them know that, right? Because you don't want them to get upset that, well, this was, why would this be extra, or what were you spending your time on, or whatever. You just don't ever want to feel like you're justifying your value to anybody. It just puts you in a bad place, right? So eventually, probably like 6 months to a year in, I will say that one of the things that I did when I started, that I would advise to anybody who's starting out, or even if you're not starting out, is I kept my initial contracts with clients like 3 to 6 months. I didn't have anything that was over 6 months, because I assumed that I was going to not know what I didn't know, and I was going to have to change my contract terms pretty early on. And I would rather change contract terms at a renewal than have to backtrack and say, hey, we need to adjust your contract because I made an error and I suck. Like I messed up. Um,
Mhm.
so kept those contract terms really short, which did allow me to then, at like the 6 month mark, 3 month mark for some of these clients, shift to deliverable based pricing. Um, so that whether it takes me 2 hours to complete it or it takes me 20 hours to complete it, like, you're paying for a deliverable. Um, and of something that is of value for you, you can decide if you think that you value that at the level that I'm pricing it for, but we're not going back and forth about, well, how many hours is this going to take you? How many, you know, like, I don't want my clients to feel like they're in a position of like, well, I might get surprised with like overage rates or anything like that. And I don't want to get stuck in a place where I've worked twice as many hours on this as I contracted for, but you're not going to pay me more for that, right? So I just do
Mhm.
deliverable based pricing now, and that's worked really well for me.
And that's an important point. I think that is really important. Is you said something earlier that your clients aren't paying for your time, they're paying for outcomes
Mhm.
and deliverables. And I loved what you said about retainer. I mean, retainer can be so open-ended and there can be so many miscommunications and misunderstandings between you and your clients until you have enough experience with it that you can really set expectations to a T. But even then, you're still going to be pushed. You're going to be, more times than not, you're the one that's going to come out on the short end rather than the client. You're going to err on spending more time on it. So moving to deliverables based pricing sounds really smart. And how did you some of the clients that you had where it was retainer, how successful were you in moving them to deliverable based pricing?
I didn't lose anybody, so that was good. And nobody
Mm-hmm.
pushed back. I think that everybody appreciated having more transparency. And I think, prior to actually making the shift, I was nervous about like, well, how are people going to receive this? But I think, again, like I said, people want outcomes and they want deliverables and they want value. So if I said, hey, here's this deliverable, it's going to take another 2 weeks or whatever, like, then you're going to get this, here's the price. I think people actually felt a lot better about that because they knew what they were paying, they knew what they were getting. And it also kind of got me out of this, which is another thing, but like, you feel like you're in this loop of, okay, what actual, at some point it started to get difficult for me to like define what like the value that of what I was doing, right? Because I'm just like, you're on a monthly, $4,000 a month retainer or something like that. And so what are we doing, $4,000 of work every month? Am I just, like, I have these hours? So it just kind of, I think, nobody protested. I didn't protest. My clients didn't protest. I think everybody felt better about moving to deliverable based pricing because they knew what they were getting and I knew what I was doing. And if they, it took it to where things were in projects as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to these ongoing retainers, um, which I know. if you're just starting out, probably feels kind of scary. And it felt scary for me too, because retainer sounds like guaranteed income, but it's really not because people can cancel it, like it's not as guaranteed as it sounds. And for me, it actually made more sense to go to deliverables. So
Okay. What's the biggest adjustment going from your corporate role to running your own business? In other words, rather than asking that question, what do you wish you knew before starting your own business?
Ooh. um, I guess I probably underestimated how much time the behind the scenes stuff actually takes. So it's really easy. You think like, oh, especially when I was doing retainers, it was like, okay, I can sell 40 hours a week or whatever. And in reality, you can't really, um,
Mhm.
because unless you want to be working twice that, right? So, how many hours a week do I actually want to be spending on client work? How many hours a week do I have to spend on things like bookkeeping or marketing or creating assets and resources for my business, you know, paying contractor, whatever it is, like how many things do I have on my plate outside of just the client work? And so I wish that I guess I would tell my former self, like, don't sell 40 hours a week of time because that's not realistic. You're going to end up working 60-hour weeks or, late into the night to try to fulfill these client promises. So, yeah, that's probably the what seems obvious now, but at the time was like, well, yeah, I'm probably going to have like an hour a day of like other work, and that's just not what it is. So,
Was it more than an hour?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There were many
Okay.
like late nights,
Okay.
but
When we talked earlier, you mentioned wanting to create one-to-many offerings. Tell us what that means to you and what steps you're taking to develop those while still serving your clients.
yeah. So, I mean, it's one thing that I tell all my clients and that I feel like I talk about a lot, when I do interviews like this or webinars or things like that, is that, you kind of hit this point where you only have as much time as you have, right? So I can, and that kind of hits also like an income threshold too, of like I only have this many hours a week to actually sell my time to people, or to actually do client work, produce deliverables, things like that. So yeah, one focus that I coach clients to, and that I am getting to myself, is doing more one-to-many resources. So things that you create that are highly valuable, that you create one time, and then, they can be sold or downloaded or um, used by as many people as want them, um, with no additional time or very limited additional time on your part. So yeah, I think that one of the things that I'm trying to do more of this year is do more webinars, do more podcasts, do more things that do scale better that you can refer people to. I've talked about X, Y, and Z. Here's this podcast, or here's this webinar, here's, those kind of things. Creating more resources, assets, courses that take people through, how to create a brand identity on their own. So if they want to work with me, here's this. It also allows me to like price a little bit more like premium for if you actually want to work one-on-one with me. Here's this pricing. Otherwise, I have these resources. So that's one of the things that I'm trying to do as well, is just create more opportunities for people to work with me that don't require me to either be face to face in real time, or actually do a lot of the work myself in real time. Like I can do work on the front end that then benefits people indefinitely, without me having to continue to do too much to it. So
Have you found that one-to-many offerings require a different marketing approach than when you're selling a outcome-based project?
Somewhat, right? Like your client base is probably a little bit different. Um, like I've worked with organizations that have successfully done both, right? So you have like again, it just kind of it's an additional tier of your business. So if you're, working in a space where you're only offering real-time services, real-time products and deliverables to people that you're doing every single time with your own time, um, that is your offer. It just is like another tier of offer, right? So I mean, yeah, you have to come up with new marketing strategy for each product but again, that comes down to like what's your brand identity? Who's your ideal client? Who are we speaking to? What are they looking for? Creating content. Like for me, the content that I'm working on creating now and like the webinars that I'm doing now, like they're all things that tie back into the value that like my ideal clients are looking for, if that kind of makes sense. So I'm creating content that I already know has value to the people that I currently serve. Um, so like, yes, you create new marketing content and material and strategies and email sequences and all of that stuff for each thing that you do. Um, and maybe the client base like changes a little bit, or like the people who are buying, like lower tier offers are either not ready or aren't in a place. I think of somebody like I think of some, I don't know if you're familiar with like Alex Hormozy, but like
Mhm.
he does a lot for free, right? So he has a ton of free content out there available for anybody to consume, but his actual client is like, he's not going to work with you unless you're paying, a bunch of money, right? But like all of the people who are in his audience are people who potentially could be his future client that he's working with. But they're going to consume a bunch of his free stuff or a bunch of his low ticket stuff like books and um, workshops and things like that before they actually become somebody who's working with him one-on-one. So it's kind of a roundabout way to say, like, that's kind of how I view it too, is like, have an ecosystem of assets and resources and things that you're doing for free or for low cost. Um, Likely the people who are in that pool of people who are consuming that content are going to ultimately be potentially people who would like work one-on-one with you, but it's just at a different price point and a different smaller percentage of those people. So, which is what you want.
Okay.
So,
Right,
yeah.
right. Okay, wonderful. Well, that's about a wrap for today. Thank you so much, Jessica, for your words of wisdom on building communities and marketing and building a brand. I really appreciate that you were here today. That wraps up our conversation with Jessica Rickel of Set to Scale Business Services. The key takeaway I want you to remember from this episode is the power of building community. As Jessica pointed out, in a world where information is everywhere, what people truly value is connection. Whether you're starting out or looking to scale your consulting practice, focusing on creating genuine community among your audience could be the differentiator that builds client loyalty and drives referrals. Now, here are some actions you can take to put this episode into practice. First, take a look at your current pricing model. Are you trading time for money, or are you pricing based on deliverables and value? Consider how you might shift to a more outcome-based pricing that rewards your expertise rather than just your time. Second, evaluate your current offerings. Are you creating offerings and opportunities for one-to-many products or services that can scale without demanding more of your time? That's something Jessica talked about, is wanting to go to a one-for-many model. Even something as simple as a downloadable resource or a webinar can begin building your ecosystem of offerings. Finally, get help if you want to get your marketing system tuned up so that it runs like a well-oiled machine. Running like a well-oiled machine is important if you want to consistently generate leads and convert those qualified leads into clients. So you have a pipeline of projects and consistent monthly income. And the best way to develop and fine-tune your marketing system is with the help of a coach or mentor. And that's where I come in. I'd love to help you get your marketing machine working like a well-oiled machine. If you are interested, I offer a free 60-minute telephone, or actually Zoom consultation. It's an exploratory consultation to talk about what you're struggling with and where you might go from here. Finally, if you like today's episode, click on subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use so that you don't miss future episodes. And please leave me a review in your podcast app or on YouTube so that other self-employed consultants can find out more about this show. Until next time, keep thriving through.